Ahoy YouTube! It's Professor Mimi from CardFight Crash Course, and I'm trying something a little different today. Today is not a deck tech. I'm not going to spend as much time talking about why we're playing the cards we're playing and all of the decisions that went into building this deck. I'll touch on that a little bit, but what I want to focus on today is the mechanics of how to successfully make Krysrain shine. Krysrain is a really powerful deck. It just won one of the largest events in North America. The Duluth, Georgia event is quite powerful, and Krysrain came out on top. The list that they were playing was essentially identical to Alicia, who came quite close to winning the event in Vancouver. The only difference was which cyclers they were choosing to play. So they basically had the same list, but then they chose minor tech options. This deck was, Alicia's is playing vanilla crits, their deck is playing effect crits. And those things matter, but they don't matter as much as how you play the deck. So, considering how little representation this deck has gotten in Japan, despite how strong it is, I worry that maybe not enough people know how to bring out its full strengths. It has some complexities going on. You have a lot of choices with Krysrain. Krysrain has a lot of text on her. You make multiple choices with each of her effects. Then her rearguards combo with her also ask you to make more choices. So you can get lost in the sauce of trying to find the best thing. And I can make that a little easier for y'all by giving you a starting template on what the cookie cutter, B&B, bread and butter, combo, attack pattern, board setup, whatever you want to call it. How we make a good, useful, optimized board that we can then turn into W's. And it all starts around our winning image. The winning image actually doesn't even start with Krysrain. The winning image starts on our turn 2. Turn 2, we can make absolute disgusting use of Francette, a card good enough to be played even if your Vanguard is not Krysrain, and Yuika. I'm sorry, budget players, but there isn't really an alternative. However, I can remind you that this Francette is getting reprinted in the new Christmas set that's coming out after Christmas. It's $25-ish now, but I think the price on this will go down once the set is opened enough. Probably similar to Yuika. Yuika used to always be like $30. Now she's down to like $15, which is still not great, but it's decent. So if Francette ends up around 15 as well, you could probably put together this whole deck for like 150, because these are, well, depending on if you own high fives or not. I'm getting ahead of myself. It could be affordable, depending on what card pool you have access to. The reason we have this as our winning image is because if we combo Francette with any of our grade 2s, or if we went first, any of our grade 1s, we just put a unit in this column. We swing. We swing with our Vanguard. We swing with this column. Francette lets us, since we have 1, 2, 3, 4 units with different names, so long as this other front row is not Francette, we can bounce that other unit to our hand. And then at the end of the battle, Yuika can Soul Blast 1 to bounce Francette, so that we got to attack 3 times, and our opponent cannot punish us by clearing out our side lanes, and they can't CB deny us without passing turn. It's a really effective way of building pressure, especially considering that Francette gets +5. So even if they hit a defensive trigger, this normally 18k column becomes 23, which is extra good going first. So if you win the die roll with this deck, you want to go first, because if we were on grade 1, we don't really have very many plays on our grade 1 turn. Like, yeah, we could call Yuika and attack, but most people will see a Yuika in your front row and attack her. And the rest of our grade 1s are in a similar situation, where we shouldn't really just be tossing them out willy-nilly. They can quite easily be disrupted. In fact, that's why we're playing this mermaid ride line here. most players, well, not most, a lot of players are playing the Willista ride line, but I think it's personally best to play the Mermaid one, because if you haven't seen Francette, then the odds are off of Sedna, you are more likely than not to then find the Francette, so you end up having Francette in like 80% of games, making this winning image of Francette, Yuika, plus additional beater, extremely consistent, and with the ace unit kind of functioning as a additional copy of Yuika that's also grabbable off of our ride line, we can very consistently build this very aggressive board and then pivot from this good start into a nice clean close. We're not trying to grind out too long. We play kind of like a force deck. We are the beatdown. We make big swings and then you attack. And you end up having very flexible board patterns to an extent, because you can pick up everything. Like as you saw with Francette picking up this, and Yuika picking up this, and then Krysrain letting us pick up something else, like Yuika here. Then we can make our board every turn. We pick them up, put them down, things we don't need, we block with, things we do need, they're safe in our hand. So it's pretty effective for us to be able to build this board over and over again. But once we hit Krysrain, this is not enough. Krysrain requires us to have 5 units. So I'm going to set this aside to discuss in a moment. But of course, one of the most important units in our deck is this grade 1, who allows us to restand one of our rear guards. And with the new absolutely busted triple rare support card Krysrain got with her new form, you can call this back from your drop zone for Energy Blast 3, so long as we've played an order card, the order card in question being High 5. I said I'd come back to it because the way this board setup works, we almost always want to use High 5 to call this girl. The emphatic rhyme Armella. There's 2 L's, so depending on what culture she's from, you pronounce that differently. I'm going to go with Armella, because she lets us call a card back from our drop zone for Energy Blast 3 if we've played an order this turn, and she gives a High 5 gives a unit plus 5k, and then we can pass off that 5k when it's bounced by something. So the way the attack patterns work is you want to use High 5 to call the other front row unit, because once we attack and then attack with Francette, we're going to bounce this other front row unit, which will then trigger the High 5 power buff to move to Krysrain or Francette or whatever. There are different reasons to put in different places. It just matters what breakpoints you're doing, if you're divine scaling, blah, blah, blah. But it costs Energy Blast 3 to revive a grade 1 from our drop zone if we have played an order, and using High 5 to call her counts as playing our order, even if we've done it from drop zone. We get our Energy Blast 3 every turn. Krysrain gives us an additional energy set of 3, which we can use on this restander. It costs Energy Blast 3 to move to our soul and restand a rear guard. So the way a typical turn plays out is we have some bonus grade 1 in our back row here, like or most of the time, honestly, it's a critical trigger from what I've seen. And we use High 5 to call this. We can use her skill to call this. We activate Krysrain's skill. We give 15,000 to Francette. We give the crit to Krysrain. We draw the card. We get the energy. And very importantly, we give the end phase bounce skill to Yuika. That's where a lot of people get tripped up, is you could choose any of these units, and which one am I going to do and why? You want to choose Yuika in the optimal setup, and I'll show you exactly why. We have this full board here, and we can very easily pivot it into an empty board. We lead with the lane that isn't Francette. We swing with this one first, so that when we attack with Francette, unboosted, we can pick up this side lane. we leave Francette unboosted because we want to use Yuika to pick her up on the next one. Don't forget her +5 is until end of turn, so on her next swing, she's going to get another +5 and be at +10 from her own skill, plus the 15 from Krysrain, making her 30 into 35 without any Persona Rise included, which is pretty good. You can even buff that up to 35 into 40 if you move the high 5 power to her, which you might consider doing on a non-Divine Skill turn. After we swing with our Francette unboosted, we swing with Krysrain. That'll trigger this unit. We can move it to our soul to draw a card and stand a rearguard. And then last swing, on a non-Divine Skill turn, we would swing with Francette and with a Yuika boost. At the end of the battle, we can use Francette to bounce our extra grade 1. And then we can use Yuika to Soul Blast 1 and bounce Francette. And then at the end of our turn, Krysrain gave a bounce to one of our units. So the last unit on board, which we thought ahead of and chose Yuika, there she is. She goes back to hand. And that full board completely floats. This card draws us a card when it floats. So we called 5, and at the end of turn, we have 5 in hand from that, which is perfectly efficient. The grade 1 goes to Soul to fuel Yuika, who then Soul blasts it back out so that it's in our drop zone, so that next turn we can do the same thing. We call Yuika, we call Francette, we play high 5 from drop zone, we call her skill, Energy Blast 3, call this out, and then we call some random grade 1 behind our Vanguard. And essentially the same thing plays out on our Divine Skill turn, but you can get a little more finesse with what you do. You can leverage her other grade 2 support card that lets you Soul Blast 2 to search your deck for anything and call it, so that you can do things like call Blue Hair Prodigy Reeeeally to give plus 10,000 to something. Be an extra booster. You can get away with quite a lot. You can make a very powerful board very consistently. The only inconsistent is eventually you run out of high 5s, sadly. You can't use them forever. That's the main focus. You swing with this sideline first, because this is going to go into Soul when our Vanguard attacks. We want to have the high 5 power on the column that isn't Francette, so Francette can make us double dip on that 5k and get it onto 2 swings pretty efficiently. We want to make sure to use Krysrain to allow Yuika to bounce during our end phase, because Yuika is one of our only cards who are not going to be able to bounce with our other skills. I mean, in theory, you could do something very similar where you are at that, or we had these are already gone because we first bounce, and this floats. Where, since this is an end of battle bounce, you could bounce Yuika at end of turn, or at end of battle with Francette, and then Yuika can bounce this, and then end of turn Krysrain can bounce this. But since we want to leave as much time as we can, because to draw effective cards to fill in this last slot, you're not necessarily going to have whatever grade 1 you want to call back there. So it's just a good practice to put it on Yuika, because oftentimes she's more important than that other card anyway. So if you don't draw something to fill in this slot, things just work out a little better. You want a board just like this. You want to Divine Skill as soon as you can, because it exerts a lot of pressure, and the best defense oftentimes is a good offense. When you Divine Skill as soon as possible, your opponent has not yet had an opportunity to Persona Ride, no matter if you're going first or second. If you are going first, your first grade 3 turn you couldn't Divine Skill, then their grade 3 turn, they ride up. They can't Persona Ride that turn. And it's your turn, you Persona Ride, and then with your huge push from your Divine Skill, you want to make it so that they don't live long enough to Persona Ride. And if they do live your turn, hopefully they had to use a lot of resources to block, or they're not going to have enough to push back, so that your next turn will allow you to finish them off, because you'll have conserved resources by not having to block their turn, because their turn was weaker, because you pushed them. So just push. If you go second, even though you haven't had an opportunity to Persona Ride and make that Divine Skill turn extra, super, Omega threatening, it's still good enough, and it really does threaten lethal. If you've gone second, even if you just swung once on your grade 1 turn, but then on your grade 2 turn you go 2, 3, 4 damage threatened, then on this turn you threaten your 5th, your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11 damage. So they're going to have to have blocked a meaningful amount of attacks, especially considering how big some of them get. Because we can use skills to power up Krysrain. Like if you have extra soul lying around, and you have the girl that's going to let you search your deck for a grade 1, you could call the blue-haired prodigy to make Krysrain even stronger, so that that first use of your first grade 3 turn, using your divine skill off rip, will exude enough pressure to hopefully clear them out. If you wait to use your divine skill till like after your opponent has persona ridden, you might not have enough cards left to make it so that your persona ride plus divine skill turn is even threatening at all. They would have had more time to farm up more perfect guards and pressure your combo pieces out of you. So you want to pressure them as soon as possible. Use it or lose it. Saving the divine skill, I think, is a big mistake that a lot of players make. Of course, it makes sense to save it, like if you swing with your first swing and then they check over trigger, then sure, save it. Unless you're extremely, extremely desperate, I would use it only if they haven't OT'd me. Just straight up use it. Now, if we haven't seen Yuika, that could make this seem a little sketchy. What are we gonna do? If without Yuika to bounce to Francette, how can we make sure we keep Francette alive? Because Francette has a huge target on her back. She's one of the strongest cards in our deck, so if we leave her on board, we can end up in a kind of a bad situation. It doesn't end up being so bad. We can call anything from our hand, like a perfect guard, or a critical trigger, or anything behind our vanguard, so that we have 5 for Krysrain. And all we do different is we give the bounce skill to Francette instead. It's a little tricky because you have a hard time meeting the 4 names requirement for her to bounce everything, because this is going to disappear. So she's not going to be on board for the second swing. And Francette on her first swing is going to bounce something. So unless you call an additional card somewhere, then you might be in a bit of a spot of bother, because then this last swing, you're not going to be able to bounce anything because you only have 3 names on board. So just remember that if you don't have Yuika, you just need to call something. Even if it's a cycler or an additional copy of a grade 2 that's not going to do anything, or a second one of the floaters, so that we can effectively bounce everything. Because without Yuika, we still do the attack pattern basically the same. We swing this side lane, swoop, swoop, swing the Francette, bounce this, swing with our vanguard, this floats, draw a card, we stand our rear guard. This can float. You can use 2 of these in one turn. Only one of them can stand something, but we need to keep this on board, so just simply don't do that. And then in our last swing, we can use Francette to bounce this perfect guard. And then end of turn, the Krysrain callback, since we chose Francette, she'll float. And then this card is decent enough to be on our board because we want it again next turn. You just have to remember to break your habits next turn and flip which sides you call everything on so that this restander can be not in the same lane as Francette if you finally do find Yuika. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what to do if we don't have Francette, because you should have Francette. In over 90% of games, since we have the top 7 check for Francette, and we have a top 5 check for Francette, as long as you don't guard with her, you can make sure that she's always safe, and she should have very little exposure to danger. She should be in a very safe position, as long as you keep her that way. You have to keep her very safe. Don't just let her go. So that covers it for the most part. However, I do want to say that this deck has a really good prison matchup. And a lot of people are always worried about prison and how strong it is and how oppressive it is. You can use this deck to absolutely clown on them. All you have to do is make sure that when they're imprisoning your cards, you want to feed them the cards you want to call. So when they make you imprison 2 from hand, imprison Francette Yuika. When they make you imprison from drop zone, off of security upgrader, send in a perfect card. So whenever they do that play to slide in security upgrader, make you put 1 in drop zone, and make you 2 from hand, you can put in these. And then as long as you are effectively emptying your soul every turn, then they won't imprison any from your soul because it'll be empty, and then won't be able to imprison any from your board because it will be empty. You extra want to be making sure to be clearing out the prison every turn because their pseudo perfect guard that blocks rear guards, grade 2 or less. I think it might even block Vanguard, but it blocks the attacks of grade 2 or less units. So if we Divine Skill and then we call Francette and then we swing for like 66 with 3 crit, and then they just use 1 card and perfectly block it because we left cards in our prison, you'll end up looking really silly. But it's quite easy to free everything from our prison because we get, until they've negated our on-place abilities from our prison, sometimes if we have extra of the empathetic rhyme, we can use her, because on place, she can soul charge us 1. So then with that, we can then soul blast 1 to free something, we can counterblast 1 to free these 2, and we can use her effect to bring something back, or if we have extra cards in our prison, we can call them out. It's pretty easy to keep the prison clear as long as you spend all your resources on it. Don't waste your counterblast drawing cards with this, because the prison is in a sense going to allow you to draw cards, because if you put cards from your drop zone that you actually want to reuse into your prison, and then you counterblast to get 2 of them out, then you counterblast 1 to draw 2, which is much better. You have to be careful about letting her go into the prison later on in the game, since they can negate your on-place abilities from prison. So, like, early on in the game, yeah, you could free... It's like a free from the prison, because when you free her... If you Soul Blast 1 to free her, right? She'll Soul Charge you 1, and then you can Soul Blast that immediately to free another card. Or if, like, you have a whole bunch of her in early on, then you can feed all of them into the prison and just... Soul Blast 1 call, Soul Charge. Soul Blast 1 call, Soul Charge. Soul Blast 1 call, Soul Charge. You can just get them all out lickety-split. So it'll give you a full board. Pretty easy. Pretty easy. And you can use the prison against them. That's one of the big secrets to beating prison, is that it can be used against them. A lot of decks, you can use it to abuse looping on call skills early on in the game, or in this case, we're going to reuse our perfect guards. We do the same play we always do. Give the Krysrain bounce skill to your Yuika, and we do the same thing we always do. Swing, swing, bounce, swing, float, stand, swing. Francette bounces the perfect guard, so we've used a prison against them. We can reuse this perfect guard every single turn. If you don't have a perfect guard, then you can recycle whatever the card in your drop zone with the highest shield is. You can loop your over trigger, which is like a perfect guard you don't have to pay for a lot of the time. We use Yuika to Soul Blast our last soul, because this could go into our soul and leave us in a spot of bother, where we are going to let them imprison us for free, but again, Yuika can always Soul Blast this out. So if we had an empty soul going into this turn, we put this in, we Soul Blast it out, we draw a card, and the Yuika will bounce this, and then end of turn, Krysrain triggers, and bounce it as a Yuika, keeping in mind that this drew us a card. We called essentially nothing from hand. We called, we want to save her to use. So then, like, next turn, if we don't have any perfect cards in our drop zone, this is our only one rotation, we just imprison this from drop zone, we imprison 2 from hand, we cradle this, so we don't lose it, we block, and then on our next turn, we Persona Ride, that gives us a 1 soul to free 1 thing, 1 counterblast to free 2 more. Call this can soul charge us 1 if we have something else in the prison we want to free. We can like put things like high 5 in the prison, then just soul blast 1 just to clear the prison out. We can skull blast 1 to call another copy of itself on top of itself, and then effectively use the prison against the prison player. I think it's pretty neat, and it's pretty free. I think I've watched Alicia lose to prison 1 time, because she gave them like a 3 pass, like 3 turns in a row, and bro just went for it every fucking turn. And then eventually, he got lucky. That's why you gotta be able to play your opponent when you're playing against those prison matchups. Different players will play it differently. You know, if you watch your opponent just go crazy with that, I'll break your 3 pass. Maybe next turn or the turn after that, when things start to get risky, consider using your perfect guards. Some players will kind of counterblast starve you. Like if you get one of the few counterblasts to Krysrain is that she kind of needs to have at least 1 counterblast every turn. So if you're totally tapped out and you have like 3 face down damage and you block the Vanguard, they might not push you to 5 and let you get the counterblast to free your cards and then push with Krysrain. But at the same time, it's not the end of the world, because then you're still at 3, right? So you just have to be able to effectively leverage what resources you do have. So try and keep that in mind when you're playing in this deck. This deck is very strong, but one of the few counterblays your opponents will have is you can get CB denied if you are blocking a little too much, like you block the Vanguard and just assume that you're going to take the rest. A advanced player might not do that, but again, play your opponent. Is your opponent the kind of person to do that? Sometimes at locals it's pretty easy to tell. Even at large events, that's one of the skills you need to cultivate, is to figure out what kind of player you're playing against. Some players play faster, some players play slow, some players, all they care about is to get you to X damage count as soon as possible, and they'll make risky plays to do that. Sometimes they'll feed you more damage than they should. Some players play too slow and are really focused on pushing your rear guards. That's your other weakness with this deck. You have very important rear guards, and if you leave them on board, your opponent will kill them, almost certainly. Like this Francette has been bothering them all game. If one turn she's pick up everything else except Francette, she's probably gonna die. If we are rushing them early game and we have a Yuika in our front row, she's probably going to die. Gotta keep your rear guards safe. They're very important. This is a rear guard centric deck in a sense, where one of the biggest attacks of the turn is usually the Francette. And it makes sense because we get to use a restander to attack with her twice. So we want to put most of our power gain effects on Francette so that we can effectively double dip on them. Like if we give plus 10k to Krysrain on our divine skill turn, sure, we can double dip on that. But other than that, we want to focus on Francette and making this little resource loop in a sense, because she'll give us the energy we need to fuel those cards, and she'll make it so that we can always get Yuika's +5 and keep her safe. She'll draw us with the draw card and then the energy blast 3. We get to draw basically an extra 2 cards every turn. So 5 cards come into rotation every turn between our draw for turn, our twin drive, our draw off of the energy blast effect, and draw off of the float. You get to see an additional 10% of our deck every turn. So with 7 cycling type effects with high 5 and our other cyclers, it's pretty easy to maintain the board you want. You just have to be careful not to give up things like Francette and Yuika willy-nilly. These cards are very important, and so is the new Rhyme friend. They make a nice, consistent board for very little investment, especially considering our ride line can help us find the pieces that we haven't found. Because we don't need Yuika per se, she's just extremely helpful. And then if we're missing anything, if we've already found these, remember our ride line lets us add those grade 2s, so there's that grade 2 that lets us search for any grade 1. So it is quite easy for us to find any of the missing cards we want. That pretty much covers everything. Again, you want to use your divine skill as quick as possible. We are trying to make the best use out of Francette we can, so you want to make sure to stand Francette so that you can bounce 2 units. You want to make sure that Yuika keeps the Francette safe. And if you don't have Yuika, you can use Krysrain to bounce the Francette and still keep her safe. You do not want to leave her on board. It's like, yes, unless you an advanced play, since we're wrapping things up, you can leave her on board if you have a second copy in your hand your opponent doesn't know about, because then they might swing a large attack at Francette, and then that can effectively make it so that she has an effective, like, 20k shield. You know, if they swing at her for 30, then you just go, no, that's too big, no guard. When you didn't really want to block her anyway, since you have a replacement copy, it effectively allowed her to, if they attacked your Vanguard for 30, she would have, and she blocked it, she would have needed 20k shield. So by having it come at her, she effectively had 20k shield, which is a cute little way of mind gaming your opponents. But again, that only works based off of how skillful your opponent is. So that's another reason to try and gauge out how you think your opponent is going to play the game. Are they going to CB deny you? Are they going to rush you? Are they going to run it at Francette, or are they just going to ignore her? Some people just never attack rear guards. They just don't. It's CardFight Vanguard, not CardFight Rear Guard. I think that's about everything. I'm just rereading my little notes here while I enjoy my tea. That looks like it's about it. We have our winning image of turn 2, Yuika, Francette, additional unit. Our bread and butter combo of leveraging Krysrain's ability to use our entire board effectively. I'm picking up 1, floating another, floating another, floating another, and floating another. We can make everything float. Krysrain floats you 1, Francette floats you 2, for a total of 3. This floats itself for 4. So as long as you can have 1 more floater, such as a Yuika or a second copy of this, it's pretty easy to make our entire board disappear. Don't get too lost in the sauce. If you're missing any of these pieces, then you want to try and leverage what you have to make a board as close to this as possible, maybe with something different here. One of your different tech grade ones that different people like to play. Some people have the guard restrict card, some people don't. Some people play Strega, some people don't. As you notice, this board doesn't have room for Strega, and with this ride line, we're consistent enough at finding the pieces we actually care about and then protecting them, where we don't really have the room to play them, and Strega isn't as valuable as you would like. This card is essentially also Strega, but instead of Soul Blasting one, it Soul Charges one. Instead of Counter Blasting one to draw a card, you Energy Blast to get the exact cards you want. And she can still Counter Blast one to draw you a card. She still has that mode, and she can give the 5k to something to hit some very special breakpoints. I think that pretty much wraps it up for in general. Again, in prison matchups, you need to empty your whole prison every turn. Do not leave cards in your soul when they go into Seraph Snow. Do not leave cards on your board when they go into Seraph Snow. They're going to rip cards from your hand, so just feed them what you want to call. Give them these from your hand. Give them something useful from your drop zone that you can reuse, like your Overtrigger, a Perfect Guard, a Floater, anything. So that when they make you eat 3, you just shoop, 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 and you can just do the same thing over and over and over again. If your prison is empty, they will not be able to use their extra Perfect Guards, so make sure that it's empty if you're going to push. If it's the end of the game and you're out of everything, well, it sucks to suck, but when you can free your prison, do as early as possible. When they start ripping things from your hand or from your drop zone early, or I think that one of their ride line pieces or something lets them hand rip, just keep feeding them the cards you want to have. It's okay to take a little bit of extra damage early so that they don't CB deny you late. Remember, their attacks late game shouldn't have crit because it should be they will almost never get to the 10 cards in prison. So you don't have to be too worried about like, oh, if I'm at 4, then I'll never be able to take another swing ever again because everything's going to have crit for the rest of the game. You might not, because they might like swing Vanguard threatening crit. If they get a crit, they swing into rearguard and swing with that and then pass. But sometimes players will realize that, oh, I'm not going to exude enough pressure like that, and they will push you to 5. So just play your opponent as much as you're playing your deck. With this little tutorial, playing the deck should be relatively linear and straightforward. It can be overwhelming at first, but with this B&B, bread and butter, board setup, and combo, you should be able to relatively efficiently pivot all of the power that's available to you for some pretty good wins. You will be surprised how much value you can get just from ripping the Divine skill as soon as you can. It might seem a little weak if you just rode up to grade 3 and do it, but remember, the way it's worded now, you get to keep the power from your booster. So with Francette, giving you 10, pass from high 5, giving you another 5, using this counterblast to give yourself another 5. You can pretty easily get up to 33. You put a Yuika behind you. You can go to 46. And you can call a card, and then like you check a trigger, and you give it all your Vanguard. You go to 56. You search your deck for the girl that's gonna call another booster, and then she'll get her own power. And you can easily swing for over 70. They have to PG that, and if they wasted a PG on your Vanguard already, they can be in a seriously dire spot because they don't want to take Krysrain's attack or the Divine attack. And with Francette being so big, they're kind of forced to take Francette twice. And with you having attacked 1 and then on your grade 2 turn 4 other times, that is threatening lethal. Because on your if you do 1, 2, 3 on your turn 2, then you attack 4, you attack with this 5, and then when it's restand 6 times, they're going to have to have blocked something. And then they still have to worry about Krysrain plus the Divine skill, so that can ask a lot of shield. And if your opponent is playing aggressive at you and giving you the counterblast to use all of your skills, you can effectively counter punish them. Counter push them. There's lots of words for it. I'm sorry that this deck isn't quite budget. High 5 is still not cheap, but it has been a promo for long enough where your local group may or may not have some. So just ask around, Remember to play at locals if you can, because there are valuable promos that you could pull that you could trade for one of these, right? Hopefully the price on this will go down. But Krysrain herself is only like $6, I think, right now. So the deck might not be the most affordable, but it's not necessarily the most prohibitive either. A lot of cards like Yuika, even if they're kind of expensive, they've been reprinted enough times where you may or may not have access to them. Keep in mind this card is being reprinted in the upcoming set. So if you are looking out for this, it could be good to get your hands on. Because as we saw, restanding Francette is very strong, and there are a few decks in Lyrical that like to generic restand rearguards. You might just want to get a playset of this anyway. I think that covers everything. I've covered our opponent's counterplay, CB denial, and killing rearguards that we leave on board. I've covered our prison matchup. Remember, free your whole prison. I've covered that we are the beatdown. You are like a force clan. You're not trying to do too much in terms of defense. You're trying to have your defense by having offense. That's why we want to fire the divine skill as soon as possible. And of course, I've shown you our winning image. Turn 2. Call a board and attack, and then bounce it. So that there's, remember that counterplay? They have to attack our rearguards or CB deny us. Well, they don't have rearguards to attack, so if they want to CB deny us, they have to straight up pass turn. It's actually quite a bit of fun. You get to draw and see a lot of cards. You get to do cute little combos. Just remember to mull for Francette, keeping things like the ace unit or high fives that are going to allow us to see additional cards. Because if you send back 3 cards looking for Francette, you have more than a 50% chance of seeing Francette. And then if you still haven't seen her, then when Sedna procs, you have a greater than 50% chance of seeing Francette again. So you are quite likely to see her, especially when you factor in the fact that you could be drawing additional cards off of your cyclers or defensive checks. You are quite likely to develop this board as long as you are looking for it. That covers pretty much everything. If anybody would like to see a deck tech for this, or see some redraw exercises or something, leave a comment and let me know. The new Lyrical set is coming out quite soon, and I will be obtaining we will be obtaining our cards, comrade. We will be having a playset of pretty much every card from the set, so we will be able to put together any deck y'all would like to see. So if there's any deck you're really excited to see, like Raise Blaze or Felty Rosa, you just let us know, and I'll show you. That's been it from me. I've been Mimi from CardFight Crash Course. Thank you all so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so that you can catch more videos like this when they come out. I'm not done making videos. I'm going to keep getting better every week. So if you want to be around for the journey and get some more CardFight Vanguard knowledge, just press the subscribe button. It's free. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really mean that. I've been Mimi from CardFight Crash Course. Take care of each other, spread love, and be kind. Bye.